have to make all these excuses for her. This, like I said, all this was this week was people who said, "Oh, she ran a flawless campaign. How ridiculous!" Or it's sexism, it's racism. This is an old playbook.
Yes, I didn't say any of those things.
I know, but I've heard a lot of these things, and like I think America's perfectly willing to elect a woman. They just didn't like the last two that were put up.
But the Vice President of the United States is basically shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
Like, you couldn't.
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, it's this idea that the idea in a mass media age that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what they're.
No.
You have someone like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
MSNBC is still choking on the fact Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump. Since November, they've been on a meltdown tour of excuses. But Bill Maher is done with their pity party, obliterating their tired talking points and shaking the smug media bubble.
The Democrats need a social media platform, this is for you, John, of their own to combat the Republican influence on Twitter. Well, I mean, I don't know, but Twitter, it's funny, it used to be completely left. Then Elon said, I'm going to take it over, so it's going to be 50-50 right down the middle. He didn't do that. It just switched completely. So I don't know. It's terrible that I think that we have our own media silos. We need places where, like this show, but there's not enough of them, where everybody comes and everybody hears everybody else from all points of view.
Maher ripped into the toxic media silos, born from the left's takeover of legacy outlets. For years, Trump was hammered 24/7 while bad news about Democrats vanished. Maher called it what it is, a corrosive echo chamber that needs breaking.
To steal a line from Dave Chappelle, who said at some point how he doesn't know very much about what goes on Twitter because he doesn't go on Twitter because Twitter's not a real place. That's sort of how I feel about Twitter. And Twitter, not only is Twitter not a real place, but it's become a toxic cesspool filled with nothing, not about right, it's not about conservative, it's just filled with misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. So I would rather not have the left replicate that if that's what's required. I think the deeper question that the question's getting at is that if you look at the data in this election, the amount of reach of all of these alternative, I'm talking about the whole podcast space mostly, but also social media, the interviews that Trump did, not starting with Rogan, but Theo Vaughn and all of these other things he did, incredible reach compared to old mainstream media, right?
Outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and NPR ran cover for Kamala Harris and the DNC, burying scandals and demonizing opponents. Voters turned to voices like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn for the truth, helping put Trump back in the White House.
You know, the number of people that Kamala Harris reached by going and talking to Brett Baer is a tiny fraction of, if you look at the average, not just the number of downloads, but then the social media plays on YouTube and other places that Trump did by hitting all of those mostly bro-friendly, skewing young male podcast platforms. I think the issue is not so much that the left, quote, needs a platform. There are a bunch of people on, Harris went on Call Her Daddy, right? All the Smoke, a few of those things. What the left has to, what Democrats have to figure out is the fact that the way to talk to voters who are not our age, and the large swelling number of the segment of young voters and middle-aged voters, is that they have to start talking to them on platforms that are not 60 Minutes and Fox News or MSNBC or any of these, I hate to say it, dying legacy media platforms.
He squirmed, danced around the truth. Legacy media was skewed against Trump. Then Maher cut through the fluff with the question the media elite have avoided for years.
Another way of saying that Twitter is real.
Well,
the internet is real. Somebody just wrote a big article about this. Like, that is where reality is now. And this is perfect for the movie you're going to do.
John Heilman mocked Twitter as a cesspool, now that the left's control is gone. Back then, censorship was fact-checking and propaganda was moderation. His outrage isn't about cleaning up Twitter. It's about losing control.
I'm going to side with Sarah about this one thing. If you're the sitting vice president for a president who has, throughout his entire term in office, been sitting at about somewhere between a 35 and 40% approval rating. People view the Biden administration as a failure. We can have a long discussion about whether they are right about that, about the economy, but the perceptions of the economy were that people thought inflation was too high, People thought we were on the wrong track, 75% wrong track numbers, and this huge inflation overhang. You're the sitting vice president, and you get put on elevated to the top of the ticket 107 days ahead of the election. I think that is a very high degree of difficulty put on anybody, and I do not think she is the perfect candidate. I tend to agree with Sarah that probably in a fully litigated primary, she probably would not have been the Democratic nominee, but we'll never know that. But I will tell you that, like, there's never been anybody who's had the difficulty of that situation, elevated that late in the campaign. Why?
During Biden's era, inflation hit 9%, gas and mortgage rates soared, wages lagged. Yet Heilman claimed it was just perception, insulting millions living that reality daily.
The President of the United States is basically shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
Like, you couldn't.
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, there's this idea that the idea in a mass media age that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what their ability. No. You have someone like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
Heilman says economic pain was just perception. Translation: voters were too dumb to see reality or judge Kamala Harris before the election. That arrogance cost the DNC the White House.
Obama becomes president of the United States after running for 2 years as president, runs a 50-state primary, is on television, does dozens of Democratic debates, and by the time at the end of that, most people knew who he was. Most people. Yeah. You drop somebody in the middle of the top of the ticket, 3 days out, 3 months out. You are going to have to spend a lot of time trying to introduce yourself to the country while also being in a steel cage death match with Donald Trump.
Okay, but I don't know if you ever watched this show, but I had Michael Douglas on this week.
Yeah.
At the top, we were talking about this, and he made a very good point that every other country in the world can do it in months, sometimes weeks. Why can every other country do it in that short period of time? Are they all so much brighter than America? I don't think so.
Mayer says America saw Kamala Harris for what she was: awkward, rambling, inefficient. We didn't need years to decide. She wasn't presidential material.
You could believe that you could have shorter elections in America, but it's not like we don't know. In Britain, for instance, when you have a short election, it's not like you don't know who the leader of the party is for months and years before that.
But you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week to make a decision? Yeah, people. And it's ridiculous. We just get sicker of them.
Voters heard Kamala Harris's message and still didn't want her. Heilman's spin won't change that. It's not confusion, it's rejection.
The mention is that no people were late deciders in the election.
No, they were. I talked about them last week.
Right. So those people apparently needed longer than 90 days.
They would have been undecided.
Always would have been.
Exactly. That's why I call them. I call them, John, I said this last week, I call them Christmas Eve shoppers. My father was one. People who don't buy their presents until the Christmas Eve night he would go into the store. And he wouldn't feel like he could do it until he was fully in the spirit. He had to be in the store on Christmas Eve with Santa and all the fucking elves and everything that was going on.
Last-minute voters knew Kamala Harris. They weighed her record and message and weren't sold. That's not ignorance. That's a verdict.
I have to make all these excuses for her. This, like I said, all this was this week was people who said, "Oh, she ran a flawless campaign. How ridiculous!" Or it's sexism, it's racism. This is an old playbook.
Yes, I didn't say any of those things.
I know, but I've heard a lot of these things, and I think America's perfectly willing to elect a woman. They just didn't like the last two that were put up.
Final hour voters knew Kamala Harris. If the closing pitch doesn't inspire trust, no name recognition will save you. She failed to close the deal.